Remember this: Oscar de la Hoya is a gripping but unreliable narrative. Famed boxer Oscar de la Hoya bears off in the two-part Max documentary The Golden, which is a wide-ranging tale of a hugely successful boxer whose emptiness brought harm and destruction for his entire life. If I had to describe the two-part series, I would call it unflinching, raw, and entrancing. Nothing about it feels glib, insincere, or plotting. It isn't trying to win the affection of the viewer. It's trying to pack a punch. Good, the bad, and even the criminal is all there. The filmmakers, director Fernando Benena, and the production team, including Mark Wahlberg and Mark Lopez, had unprecedented level of access. Video footage, old interviews, family, photos, news, reporters, access people who knew from the beginning, separate interviews including managers, opponents, friends, his childhood best friend, and his formerly estranged children. Glenna did a bang-up job of contextualizing how Bill Clay's past had irrevocably shaped this present and of course, the best interview this gentleman himself has gone to the black and white shots hiding his face, which might symbolize that he's entombed in the past, flesh and blood, but not fresh, with desperation in his eyes. His reign and legacy from his childhood on the streets of East Los Angeles is explored with a level of detail that most figures avoid, opting instead to showcase the glory, but not really the grind. This documentary is a confessional of a childhood replete with violence. De La Hoya didn't have a childhood by his own words. He grew up feeling deeply lonely and misunderstood, thrust into a life he didn't choose. He didn't have loving parents. He had a legacy passed on by his father and grandfather fighting. Both parents were from Mexico, and they settled in an area that was occupied by the blight arising from institutionally raided communities, public and private violence. And this violence became emblematic of De La Hoya's past and his future. He was harshly trained by his father, forced to wake at 4 a.m. to run as a 10-year-old boy, surrounded by the dangers of a still awake neighborhood, forced to run from dogs, shrouded by his own fear, and at home, bullied by his older brother and his mother, who chose him to act out her internalized rage upon him, violently disciplining him until he dissociated. When his family members would drink, adults would use the children as their punching bags, creating a tormenting ritual to toughen De La Hoya up by punching him in the face. And his grandfather passed that down. You see, he used to tie De La Hoya's father to a tree with chains and beat him when he disobeyed. So the apple didn't fall too far from the tree. Bell Hooks would describe De La Hoya's family as the loveless home. Care and affection maybe was present, but ultimately it was loveless because love and abuse do not coexist. De La Hoya recalls being hit by a car after running into the street to retrieve a ball, and his mother responded by slapping him in the face and blaming him for what happened. De La Hoya was a small and sensitive boy who deeply craved a sense of belonging and validation, but his path was worn. Fight your way out of the circumstance and find meaning in public recognition. The terror of his mother's physical abuse consumed him, transmogrifying itself into an opponent. Later in the documentary, De La Hoya admits that he would train and imagine he was punching his mother. Her brutality felt all the more confusing because he often had to reconcile that with her cooking food for him and her angelic singing. He longed to feel that sense of peacefulness with her rather than condemnation and spite. Like many traumatized people, De La Hoya's public face was artifice. He often would cite his mother as his biggest supporter and his biggest inspiration. After she tragically passed from cancer at only 38, and he turned the abuse into a fantastical lie that her dying wish was for her son to become an Olympic medalist, which was a lie repeated by Jay Leno and eventually, once he did it, George Walker Bush. De La Hoya trained very hard and did indeed win the Olympic gold, and after which managers saw an opportunity to cash in on his brand, and he was groomed by PR to soften his speech, affix an unctuous smile on his face, and use his wife-adjacent physical features to become palatable to the American public. So the secret to his success was at once his ability to crave adulation and endure pain simultaneously. Yet the fear of facing the atrocities of private abuse made that resilience possible. But the single most breathtaking confession is that he often dissociated in the ring, leaving his body and just going somewhere else. He cites an image of a winning fight, and he points out that he wasn't present and that the fight was, like all of his fights, just a way to escape his mind. That's a tragedy of human emotions. Without an attachment to one's identity or a sense of worth, you are but a mere body. You're a vehicle or vessel to be transported on someone else's journey to earn their fame or their fortune or their power or their desires. And yet, he was winning. He was making money. His accolades include winning 11 world titles in 6 weight classes, ranking him as the 38th best boxer of all time. He won the Olympic gold medal at just 19 years old, and he said he didn't take it off. He would wear it around the city, and he would pull it out when people asked him where it was. But it wasn't enough for his father, so Hoya became world champion at 21, pushing himself more and more. And this is when the Golden Boy was born, a nickname invented to create a brand. He was good looking, he was a winner, he had a tough past, but he was perfect. This story was a distinctly American one. And still, De La Hoya was enshrouded in shame. He wasn't better, he was famous. He wasn't happy, but he was rich. And the more successful he became, the more pronounced the trauma of his past beleaguered him. And that's when De La Hoya's internal violence became externalized. Trauma creeps into everything. De La Hoya's indiscretions. Trauma creeps into everything, whether you're succeeding or failing, single or in a relationship, at home or on vacation. The internalized sense of rootlessness, the fear, the flashbacks, feeling stuck in prison in time, it doesn't dissolve, it doesn't go away. And often it manifests itself in profound self-abandonment or harmful behaviors. Some psychologists call it self-sabotage. The second part of De La Hoya's life, the private part, being public, is characterized by this self-sabotage of his career, himself, and especially his relationships. At the peak of his career, De La Hoya met Shana Moakler, former Miss USA, actress, and these days most famous for being Travis Barker's ex-wife. They had this whirlwind public romance, and Moakler spilled significant details about how in love they were and how quickly things went. And when she began to hear whispers of De La Hoya's indiscretions and that he had outside babies, she said it was okay as long as he told her the truth. Of course, he denied it until he was forced to take paternity tests by the mothers. And then it happened again while she was pregnant. Within 18 months, De La Hoya was a father to 3, 2 sons and a daughter with Moakler. And she still stayed. He was cheating, he was drinking too much, he was partying too much, and she still stayed. De La Hoya admits that he felt incapable of being a father or even staying at home. He shut out the people he loved the most, and he embraced the fame, the status, the money. He was consumed by this screaming emptiness that he tried to fill: more sex, more drugs, more money. And eventually, he decided to record an album. He was encouraged by his people to drop Moakler for a Latina woman because a Latino musician needs a Latina woman on his arm. So he promptly picked one of the whitest Latinas you can imagine, no disrespect, alabaster skin and light eyes, and they fell in love. And Shana's retelling of how he broke up with her feels positively sociopathic. I'll let you watch the documentary to see. But through a lens of trauma, you can imagine De La Hoya is consumed by a desire for more. Millie, the Puerto Rican singer he literally selected, was another foothold into more adulation, more power, more money. Yes, the PR relationship transformed into a real marriage within just months of dating. He was immediately miserable. They bought a huge mansion in Puerto Rico, Millie got pregnant, but De La Hoya admits they didn't even know each other. They were basically strangers who decided to get married, and he wasn't happy. De La Hoya's public and private violence, content warning, sexual violence. The sexual assault piece was shocking, but the filmmaker's decision to go there is what sets this documentary apart from its milquetoast peers. De La Hoya has been accused multiple times of sexual assault, sexual abuse, sexual impropriety, with disturbing parallels. I'm going to go through each one because the documentary doesn't break down every single case, it just mentions them several times. So in 1998, a 15-year-old girl alleged that De La Hoya imprisoned and assaulted her in a hotel room in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. This case was settled out of court. Of course, he denied the allegations. In 2012, a model and sex worker sued De La Hoya after a consensual encounter, but later that evening, he continuously tried to have sex with her, which she denied. Her case was dismissed, and she was ordered to pay a fine to De La Hoya and his attorneys. In 2019, a DJ alleged that De La Hoya assaulted her. In 2017, after a consensual sexual encounter, he invited her to his home and then demanded that he. She declined, and he did it anyway, laughing and telling her just to take a shot of alcohol. In March 2020, an executive of a tequila distillery in which De La Hoya has financial stake alleged that De La Hoya pulled her into his bed and violently assaulted her after she rejected his advances the night before. He denied the allegations then and now, and for legal reasons, I'm going to be nimble with my words. But the description of the assaults were in parallel. A man who famously cheated on all of his partners, admitted to loving strippers and cocaine, allegedly routinely committed acts of sexual violence against women. And these allegations are pretty horrifying. I want to contextualize them in a childhood that was ridden with violence, and there's strong evidence that many violent abusers experienced violent abuse. And De La Hoya admitted in an interview just a couple of years ago that he was sexually assaulted by a 35-year-old woman when he was just 13 years old. And since these are allegations, I cannot state that these things happened, nor can I absolve him of what he allegedly did or did not do. But I do think that what gets lost in these conversations about sexual assault is that sexual violence happens across many contexts for many reasons. And the main one we know is that it's a power grab by sociopaths, and that it's this ultimate act of violation to escape and internalize sense of powerlessness. Again, De La Hoya denied it then and denies it now. This aspect of his life story fits among an assemblage of cyclical violence. It's also important to note that these allegations have not marred his public image, nor could I find any evidence that De La Hoya lost any of the civil lawsuits filed against him from the past till now. And it's actually really hard to find news stories about several of these allegations. So in the final act of this film, we see this kind of collective fall from grace. Toward the end of his career, De La Hoya voices his regret, admits how internally working it is. But a new trait emerges: defiance, particularly toward his children. Atiana, Devin, and Jacob, whose 3 abandoned children were the same age, sit for interviews, and they describe how they are bound by their father's absence. Each recounts the pain and confusion they felt of having a famous, prominent father, but not knowing him or feeling loved by him because he was chronically absent despite financial provision. And one heartbreaking anecdote, Atiana recounts going to see her father and meeting one of her brothers in the seat next to her on the airplane, later wondering what she could possibly have to talk about with her father. They found deep and loving connections with one another, which is a bright spot, a huge bright spot in this story of abandonment, but not with him. De La Hoya kind of does that whole I can't change the past thing, and we blitz through the latter period of his career, observing, more and more financial success, the creation of his own quite company called Golden Boy, but also a clear increasing drug and alcohol dependency, including a brief stint in rehab and the uncomfortable fact that he is still not sober. When his children confronted him recently about drunken behavior, he stopped talking to them for a few months. and the relationship is still rocky. Puffy face and bleary eyes tell the story. Here it becomes clear. A frightened adult child is still firmly rooted in his psyche. De La Hoya is seeking absolution, not a reckoning. He bleats uselessly about his mother being a grounding force in his life, and if she were alive, he would have been a good father. Never mind the loyal and patient Millie, who gave up a career to be a stable parental figure at their mansion back in Puerto Rico. And it isn't mentioned in the documentary at all, but they did divorce in 2016. But she stayed almost 16 years. Millie Moore are the three children from that marriage actually in the documentary for interviews. That's Oscar Jr., Nina, and Victoria. At the tail end of the doc, we see Oscar's final confession. Media scandal of something rotten. Oscar liked to dress in women's lingerie legs during his trysts. Photos got leaked to the press, and his team was able to hire a Photoshop expert to testify that the photos were clearly doctored. De La Hoya admits that they were real pictures. And Milana, the Russian stripper who used to spend time with Oscar, is there in some of the photos, sits for an interview and explains that Oscar said he used to dress up in women's clothing with his mother because she'd always wanted a daughter. Never mind that he actually has a sister who was his mother's daughter. But he does admit the pictures were real, but there's no other explanation beyond that. There's nothing deeper about why he wants to dress in women's clothing or whether he did when he was a child. For what it's worth, one of his alleged victims stated in one of her testimonies that he also dressed up in lingerie during an encounter they had. It is a confession, but I will admit that it feels anticlimactic in the era of RuPaul's Drag Race and gender bending and expanding the boundaries of gender and sexuality and all those things. It doesn't feel like this huge reveal at all. But that's also because De La Hoya isn't writing for reckoning. He believes in an almost childlike fashion that confession is the same as redemption. Doing the hard work of owning up to your mistakes, hearing the pain that you've caused, making a decision to change your behavior, and accepting some kind of consequence for what you've done. Rather, he wants to enshrine his life into a film, the good, the bad, the ugly, as evidence of his healing. But this man is far from healing and recovery. He's at step one, admitting that there's a problem. De La Hoya is still in the ring. De La Hoya denounces the golden boy as a fraud, a false image. He repeats that he wants to tell the truth and make his private misery public. Friends, family, and business partners lament his final fight with Manny Pacquiao. How terribly outmatched he was, drinking through his training, no longer gutsy and limber. He's slow and exhausted. As Manny Pacquiao deals him numerous blows to the face, blood and inflammation spreading, De La Hoya kind of gives up. He admits that he wanted to die in the ring. The ring is the metaphoric cage De La Hoya feels enshrined and shrouded by. He believes that by bearing his soul, that's how he gets out. And yet, as Oscar De La Hoya looks at us from the side of his face, there are no breakthroughs here. He looks and feels like scared Oscar, that little boy running from pensions and dogs and a sense of being a failure. He has money and business ventures and millions of followers, but he still lacks any kind of healthy bond with his family and with himself. Admissions can be groundbreaking or a false patina to patch over the day-to-day truth of who we are, what we do. He states that Golden Boy was all a lie, yet his IG profile contains a single word. Can you guess what it is? De La Hoya's documentary asks us a question. Is there a liberation in speaking the truth? And what do we owe to others after the truth has been said? I know to just